talking about how to position yourself for a corporate board position. And you know, optimizing boardroom decision-making through gender diversity should be a critical goal for every organization, especially in the kind of highly complex and risky world that we're all living in right now. But in 2021, get this, women still hold less than 15% of senior positions among Fortune 500 companies and less than 17% of all Fortune 500 corporate board seats. In 2021, among the largest 3,000 US publicly traded companies, only about 1 in 5 board members are women. And that's according to Equilar, which tracks corporate governance data. It says that nearly 1 in 10 boards actually have no women. And when half the planet is female, having women in positions of influence on corporate boards is an obvious benefit to businesses both large and small. So today, Colleen will be leading a discussion about what we can do about inadequate representation for women on corporate boards today. Colleen will help all of us learn how to prepare for a corporate board position and what it really takes to serve on a corporate board. Now, first, let me tell you a little bit about Colleen. Colleen was recognized in 2019 as a most influential corporate director by Women Inc. magazine. She's been named by NACD as a top 100 director in the US. She was selected by NACD as Director of the Year, and Corporate Director magazine has identified her as a top 10 corporate director you should know. Seattle Business Magazine named her as the Outstanding Public Company CEO, and she is NACD Leadership Fellow and a member of the Aspen Leadership Institute. Now, many of you know Colleen and you recognize how really remarkable she is, but I will say that I have had the pleasure of knowing Colleen for a number of years, and she is a truly inspirational leader. During her tenure as director and CEO of Fisher Communications, Colleen was named GAMCO Management Hall of Fame winner for delivering outstanding shareholder value. Colleen has also served in the C-suite of Belo Corp, which is a Fortune 1000 company, the president of broadcasting for Lee Enterprises, and a president at Gannett, a Fortune 100 company. And Colleen began her career in television and digital technology. Please help me in welcoming Colleen Brown. Colleen, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Linda. That's a little overwhelming. Thank you. It's so great to see so many folks from my current and my past, and also so many interested women in learning about the subject. So Linda, thank you for inviting me, and all of you, thank you for joining us for this 45 minutes to an hour. I love working in this area, and I know that to many, this may be elementary, the information I'll provide today. To many, it may be more than you want to know. So I encourage you to stick around through it so you can ask questions. No question is a bad question. I deal with people from many different levels who are interested in board work, and I look forward to jumping in here, Linda.
I love that. Thank you. And thank you for joining us, Colleen, and leading us through this discussion. So to kick us off, why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey? What's led you to have such passion around advancing and empowering women and ensuring gender equality across corporate boards?
You know, that's a loaded question because I've spent my life dealing with corporate boards since I was about 30. And at that time, they were predominantly all men. And you start to realize how few women there are actually in leadership roles as well as in the boardroom. And it became incredibly evident to me that some of the fun things that women bring that are absolutely essential to a boardroom were lacking. And diversity in general makes for a much more robust conversation in the boardroom. And the perspectives alone add to the decision making. So I felt from my own experience and background that there was an opportunity. My own path was unique and different, as everyone's is, as they get onto boards. In my case, it was probably mostly due to my entrepreneurial mindset, where I would sort of stick out because I was the one who wanted to compete with Monster, back in the day at Belo. I was one of the ones who wanted to get on the Career Builder board as classifieds were being taken away. I can keep going, but my own entrepreneurial startup experience within companies made my mindset something that others wanted to know more about and put me on boards where I could perhaps influence the board or influence the company's investment in that board. And that led to, many years of nonprofit service, which I encourage all of you to do. It's a great opportunity to polish your skill sets and at the same time give back. Some risk taking. Very important. And then the last is, my own experience exposed me to so many incredible people. Those relationships along the way built a foundation for me to pursue diversifying boards. And, in Seattle, I'll just close with this. In Seattle, it was very obvious to me that there was a huge swath of wonderful women who were not being noticed to serve on boards. And part of that reason was, this is when I was working in Seattle, or our headquarters was there. Part of the reason was we were heavily tech. And heavily tech meant there were fewer women, which meant then that a lot of our composition in the community was made up of just higher senior level men. And as a result, we started many initiatives to start shining a light on these really talented women, so that they had an opportunity to be seen and be visible and others to get to know them. And we started 2 different initiatives in Seattle that are still going today, and they're very vibrant. So I'm still very passionate about it in whatever market I serve.
Yeah, I love that. And your passion is evident, Colleen. So first, let's level set the discussion. Colleen, can you help us understand how boards work? What are boards actually responsible for? And then we'll talk about the different kinds of boards, but let's level set in terms of if you were to be a board member, what is that board responsible for and how does that actually work?
Well, boards are the governing body of an organization, and corporations can be nonprofit. There's so many different forms. So just understand that almost anything that's out there as an organization is a corporation in some form, and there are all kinds of boards. It's very common to have anywhere from 7 to, the bigger the company, 15 board members. There's committee roles that are required, and so 7's kind of the minimum, plus you want an odd number so you don't have a stalemate on the board. But the roles themselves generally are the CEO. If the CEO is also the chairman, then you need a lead director, typically an independent lead director. And then you have committee chairs, and then you have, and the 3 key committees are audit, comp, and NomGov. At times there are risk committees. At times there are technology or innovation committees. But the 3 recognized committees that are often evaluated critically by Wall Street or others are the 3 I mentioned first: NomGov, comp, and audit. So the roles within each of those require different skill sets. The most important thing to realize about a board is you have a fiduciary responsibility. A lot of folks don't understand really what that means. That means 3 things: duty of care, meaning fiduciary and legal. So finance, financial experts, legal involvement in the company and doing the homework. Duty of loyalty, not to yourself, but to the company, so that, tempting things come along the way. You shouldn't be trading with insider knowledge, that kind of thing. So duty of loyalty, and duty of candor, meaning disclosures, conflicts, knowledge that you need to disclose. Those are the 3 fiduciary duty responsibilities that you should keep in mind. Then there's the mandate that all of us take on when you go work on a board or you provide an organization with board capabilities. The job of the board is to be where the buck stops. It is the end of the road, if you will, for oversight. And you oversee all the strategics, the financials, more and more, the capital side of things. And and the risk side of things. That's probably one of the biggest things we talk about. But the oversight of the company rests at the board level. I like to call the second part of this the information or the baloney factor. Being senior enough to be able or emotionally intelligent enough to understand when you're being sold a bill of goods, or understand the stress that management's under, but understand the information that's coming to you and be able to ask questions that see through all the different emotions so you can get to an actual root cause or understanding of what's going on. Group dynamics, remember, a board is made of mostly CEOs or mostly high-level functioning executives or individuals. And as a result, you're in a sea of really talented folks, maybe the most talented environment you will be in any 1 hour, 3 hours day. And then understand time management, because these type of people, they don't like to waste time. So you have to be very efficient and thoughtful about how you spend time. And then, and that I consider the insight side of things, knowing how to function in this kind of a group. And then, and the insight to management too, because they rely on your background, your history, and your skill sets and attributes to contribute to the company overall and their management of it. And then the last is create and protect value, which I call the foresight side of it. This is mostly for shareholders. In the past, we're seeing more now on the stakeholder side, where your job is to provide, foresight as to decisions that have unintended consequences or technologies that impact the shareholders in 2 to 3 years. So knowing your strategic direction and what things could intercept, your strategy or disrupt your strategy, or that's the foresight side of the business. So that's the mandate, the oversight, the insight, the foresight, and then you've got your fiduciary responsibilities.
Yeah, I love that. I love the way that you framed that. I think that that's just brilliant. So let's talk about the different kinds of boards. What kind of boards are there, Colleen? And then how do they differ in terms of responsibility and accountability of the actual board members? You talked about foresight and insight, and how does that differ depending on whether you're part of a Fortune 500 board or a nonprofit board?
Well, this is a really important question for this group because there's all levels of interest. And so I want to be as clear as I can. There are so many opportunities to serve in a board capacity that are really fun and exciting, whether or not it's on a small nonprofit all the way up to the big guys like the American Cancer Society or United Way. And nonprofits don't require a lot of board experience. They just really want you representing some aspect of a sector or technology or background. So really a good place to start. And that's where I started. My first board I was 29 years old here in Denver, and I served on Mi Casa, Mi Carrera. And this was a long time ago, so bear with me, but it was all about helping women get in the workforce with appropriate decorum, clothing, hair, makeup, who needed a fresh start. Anyway, through that process, an executive saw me, asked me to serve on their board, and my first corporate paid board was the Young Americans Bank here in Denver, and that was an amazing experience for me because it set a foundation where I was able to know what I needed to learn along the way, because I didn't know anything when I joined that board. But there are all kinds of boards, that you need to think about. The Fortune 500 are typically today the best diversified boards out there. Then the Russell 3000 is right behind them. And then all other, the mid cap and the small cap and the micro caps, are generally statistically less diverse, gender balanced. And then you've got the fun ones. You've got what I consider the seed companies. Somebody has an idea and they want to put a board together. And you learn a lot about working with high profile or high energy people. Then you go to early stage, then you go to growth stage, and growth stage are where you can really use your own individual expertise to boost up whatever it is they're trying to get done. So if you have a background in, say, marketing, and they're a growth stage company, that's a really good way to help them and learn board skill sets. And then, of course, it goes on to all different kinds of structures like private, There's PE, private equity. There's family run, which is a great way to navigate difficult kind of conversations. Then, of course, there's venture, which I've served several times on venture boards. And those are really fun because it's an idea you're trying to get started, and or an investment strategy where you're spending a lot of time looking at a lot of companies. So all of these are different kinds. I probably missed even a few, but there's lots of different boards and lots of different ways you can get involved.
Thank you for that overview. That's actually really insightful. But that brings me to my next question. How do you know which board is right for you? Or perhaps a better way to frame that question is, how do you know that you are the right person to serve on a specific kind of board?
Well, you all know what your strength is and what you like to do. And so start there. If you love horses, find an organization that is nonprofit and serve on that board, and volunteer your skills and your resources and your interests. If you've got a background in helping the hungry, food banks are always looking for somebody to get on those boards and help with whatever your skill set is. If it's accounting, if it's, just whatever you bring to it, bookkeeping, it can be anything. But also, I think it's really important, besides just knowing your own skill set, kind of know what these companies are starting to need. And we're seeing a big shift of allowing first-time board members to bring in what your skill set is to, especially these growth companies or early seed companies where you've got this background that could help them accelerate their growth. Huge interest in that area. And you need to work with private equity or venture and get known and seen. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but there are so many different kinds of ways to apply what you're strong at and what you're interested in. Right now, there's, traditionally it's always been about the financial side and being a CEO of some sort, but that's changing. And we're looking deeper and wider now. And we're looking for folks who come from an international background, which I know specifically one person up here who shall remain nameless, has an international background in marketing and Gardenia. And also, I know that, certain people have spent more time looking at risk. If you have a legal background, and you can bring that to some of these earlier profile boards. They love strong operating backgrounds. And certainly if you've had P&L experience, that's almost everybody wants that on their board. So know your industry, know what skill sets you can bring, know where you can enter, whether it's nonprofits or early startup or growth, or even, companies that have been around a while. And then first and foremost, make sure you have a track record of integrity and leadership, because that's really important to boards. And then once you get on the board, understanding that there's probably 9 others of you who are very highly skilled, and you need to keep that in your mind when you're speaking and using everyone's time, because time is of the essence on a board.
Right. So Colleen, thank you. That I think gives an incredibly detailed and comprehensive view of how you can begin to select which kinds of boards you want to serve on. And if you feel like you're the right person to serve on a specific kind of board, then how do you know when it's the right time to make that move and actually raise your profile, raise your sense of visibility, and serve on a board? When is the right time to begin that process?
Well, I always coach people on this, that it's when you identify that you actually have the time and the desire to serve on a board, that's probably the right time. The time, because most boards meet 4 or 5 times a year. There's probably some committee work involved. The average amount of time it takes, according to the NACB, is between 250 to 350 hours a year. You can divide that down and figure out how many days that is. And that's really generally not including travel. Whether or not you have the desire, meaning it's not a bed of roses. You walk into a boardroom. Well, first of all, you'll interview a lot for boards and may not get on. It's a long process. The second piece of it is once you get in there, understanding that you have this desire to contribute, and so does everybody else, and you have to find a way to appropriately onboard yourself to the board. And that takes a certain amount of emotional intelligence to realize your time will come. You may not know everything, do your homework, learn about the company, et cetera, et cetera. So that you have that kind of emotional balance to be dealing with the frustrations that a new board member will face. The ability to influence others without dictating, that's a big shift from your day job. Because you're not management anymore. You're there to provide insight, to be a skeptic, if you will, but do it in a constructive way, because you don't want to throw, a stink bomb into the middle of management when they're going through a crisis. You got to find a way to be constructive, because you're only, coming into it in an intermediate way. And then this is old saying in board work: head in, fingers out. For folks who have been executives elsewhere, that's the hardest thing for them to understand. You're not management anymore. Your job is to literally put your head in and listen, and use your head, but don't do, because then you're what we call piercing the corporate veil, and you've become management, which is a different risk profile. So the last is just understanding when you have that capacity to actually contribute. Don't go on a board if you're just going to take up a seat. Board seats are very valuable, and you won't get much out of it, and neither will your board or the company.
That's great. A lot of people think that serving on a board will bring them a certain level of prestige or significance, or perhaps this is their way of diversifying their revenue streams. They expect to have a really significant compensation associated with a board seat. So first off, Colleen, can you speak to that? Do you believe that's true? And what should your motivation be for serving on a board?
Yeah, I think life is kind of short to think that you're serving on a board for the money. By the time you get ready to serve on a board, it shouldn't be why you're doing it for the money. I also don't think you should do it for the prestige, because that too can fail. You could be, on GE's board, and now look what's happened. They were once the best board ever to be on, and now they almost can't get out of their own way. Exxon board is another one today in the news. And I know I'm throwing out some big ones, but those are the ones that you might read about, right? Well, fortunes change on board. So if you believe in the mission, because that's where you get the pressure. And I noticed that somebody noted the proxy contests I've been involved in. And if you have questions about proxies, I'll answer later, but it's really when an activist shareholder comes after you and or your company or your board to say, you're not doing enough, you need to do more, it's not working, etc. Having that strategy and working that strategy is really critical. So having a board that believes in your mission is critical for the company and the CEO. And if you don't believe in the mission, probably shouldn't, join the board. And then knowing when you can make a positive difference, meaning, you're really ready to take on. I did American Apparel. Many of you know, I was recruited to be the calm voice at American Apparel and essentially make sure that we got to the bottom of the situation with these early Me Too comments, and then eventually structured it in such a way to make sure that the governance was properly in place, so that the board and that management could make a positive difference in the future of the company. I knew it was 50-50 going in, that it would survive. We ended up packaging it for a Chapter 11 reorganization and sold it to Goldman Sachs and Gildan. It was a dual thing. But the bottom line is, things can get hairy when you get on a board. And as much as you do your due diligence, and in that case, I knew there was a situation, but you got to be able to spend the time, be committed to the purpose, which was manufacturing in America. That was the purpose of that company, and make a positive difference in the life of that company.
That's great. Thank you, Colleen. So now on to the big question, this is the reason why all these ladies have joined. How do you prepare to be on a board? What do you need to do to raise your visibility, raise your profile, and prepare to serve on a board?
That's a good question, Linda, because I think a lot of this, the answer to this will help inform you on whether or not you should serve on a board, or whether or not it's the right time for you to serve on the board. So the first thing I always coach some of the folks I've worked with to draft up their board resume. This is not your CV for your job. Your board resume is where you have shown that you have an industry that you are an expert in. You have skill sets that you are unique at, and other examples where you've served on boards is helpful, although not necessary. But being exposed to boards, knowing the work of boards, and how you think you can make a difference, and also understand that a board resume should be appropriately tweaked for the industry you're pursuing. If you're pursuing something in, let's just say, the environment, like land management or, I don't know, solar energy, that's a whole different kind of necessarily resume than if you're going to go into retail. And you might have the skill sets to do both, don't know. But really think about your board resume. And by doing that, you start sorting out what you might be good at and where you might be able to apply your skill sets. The next is a board bio, which should be a paragraph or two. And that's because, honestly, any board or board recruiter will only take a minute before they discard you or it. And so really think about your elevator speech and why you'd be good for a board. Also, I can't emphasize this enough. Anybody who gets a slight interest in you looks at LinkedIn. So make sure your LinkedIn profile is board ready. And it doesn't hurt to find a mentor, somebody you can trust, that you trust knows about boards, and talk to them about being on a board and get advice. And the more you do that with people you trust who could be in a position, the more they think of you as interested in a board. Be engaged is the second thing I recommend for everyone. Be a resource for others. I've been doing this as a resource as long as I've sat in the CEO suite, if not longer. And I think it's really important to do. And I've been given a helping hand throughout my career, mostly by women, some men, but mostly by women. And I just committed I was going to do that too. So being a helping hand to others is a great way to start. Making intros, you have your contacts, you have your ways of opening doors for others. I believe karma comes back positively in that sense. I also think serving on panels, giving speeches, being an expert, being visible, really nurturing your friendships, your relationships. You're not networking like, go to a cocktail party and start, hitting up someone to put you on a board. That's really a negative thing. But being curious about what boards they're on and how they got on them and any advice. And, that's a whole different approach than saying, here's my resume, can you circulate it? That doesn't go over as well. And then the last is, the biggest thing is educate yourself, because like anything, the more you do this, serve on boards, the better you are at it. And the more you hang around board members and directors, the better you are at understanding how boards work. And they're, like anything, they're unique. And every board's different, by the way, but attend conferences, read, there's tons of materials on boards, there's expertise, join. I'm part of NACD. I serve as a resource for NACD, that's National Association of Corporate Directors. There's WCD, which is Women Corporate Directors, which I've been a part of forever. There's a board list, there's board prospects. They all provide great material for you to learn about how boards work and how boards are thinking and what the issues are. So hopefully that's helpful on what to do.
Yeah, that's super helpful. And, you suggested networking, and I will say that is one of the real benefits of organizations like LeadHERship Global 2, is that you get access to incredibly remarkable, distinguished, successful, and significant women like Colleen, to be able to not only network with, but really develop relationships with. So if it's not LeadHERship Global, I do suggest that all women join a women's organization that is intentional and purposeful about advancing the success of women. So last question, and then we'll open it up for everyone else to ask their questions of you, Colleen. So maybe 5 more minutes of me, and then we'll open it up for everyone else. What are, in your mind, what is the very best advice and guidance that you can offer someone to serve on a board? What are the very best next steps that they can take?
First of all, be intentional about your purpose. Just scattershot activity will wear you out. So be intentional on what you're doing. Understand how things work. Boards are structured in such a way that there are 2 or 3 people in charge of getting board members. Generally speaking, the CEO is keeping a good eye out for board members. The chairman is very much seeking, sometimes the lead director, but not always. And the chair of NomGov. Absolutely, the chair of NomGov is, you got to figure out who that is. And with, social media and LinkedIn and everything today, you can find out who the NomGov chair of any board you want to know. And also knowing why you're addressing one company versus another. And so if you're interested in the industry, if you're interested in a company, anything that you can get to read about that company, all their press, if they're public, or if they have public loans, you can find information about them on their filings, their SEC filings, NASDAQ, New York Stock Exchange, on their websites. But you should learn as much as you can about the industry or the company you have that you're interested in. And seek advice, like I talked about earlier, build relationships, take a leading role where you are now. Make sure that your work is being profiled, so that your hard work is visible, you're passionate about your work. And that means you might write some articles or blog or, speak on panels, et cetera, as we mentioned. Join where you can, take leadership roles to polish your skills in board governance, and get out there, because with visibility comes recognition, and with recognition comes opportunity. So I really encourage you to get out there and be an expert in what you're doing right now.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Colleen. I think that was great advice. I tried to capture much of that in the chat. May have missed a few points, so if anyone else wants to add to the chat, that would be lovely. And now we're going to open it up. So please feel free to go off mute. We'll just make this a small group discussion. You don't have to ask your questions through chat, although you're welcome to. And let's start the discussion. Does anyone have any other further questions for Colleen about if you're offered a board seat, should you take it? What do you think makes a great director? So anyone have any questions that they'd like to ask Colleen directly?
Can I just ask one clarifying question? You talked, I understand finance legal. Can you just define what you mean by NomGov?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I use, and that's another thing, learn the acronyms. Almost all board members use the term NomGov. That's the Nominating and Governance Committee of the board. Thank you for calling me out on that. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that was the committee I was familiar with. That's the committee that searches out, recruits board directors. That's
correct.
Thank you.
Correct. And provides the governance of the board. So they're the ones who are working on the matrix. Every board, generally, every good board has a matrix of skill sets. So you have your directors and you have all the skill sets they think they need for their board. And then every board member and every board populates that matrix. And if they suddenly, like right now, I'm dealing with a board that 10 years from now, and we think that way, by the way, that 10 years from now is going to be absent any technology or any venture or entrepreneurial bent because of the way people are rotating off the board. We are conscious of always making sure that we've got somebody in that category at all times on the board, and usually not one, but two. But you realize as you see people rotating off the board, some boards have term limits. I'm on one board that has term limits. And in 3 years, we realize we're going to have this big gaping hole. And so thinking about that, because that affects the cycle of the three-year terms, is very important for the board, because management average life is 5 years as a CEO. The board's average life is 14 years. as it should be in many ways, because the board needs to be the context and the stability. The CEOs come in with new ideas and push the company forward, but you need that background of consistency with a board. So that's non-gov. They make sure that we're, performing, functioning as a company as well as a board.
Thank you.
It looks like you've come off mute. Do you have a question?
I do have a question. Hi, Colleen. These have been fantastic tips, but I still sit here with my imposter syndrome going, well, I can't do that. Well, I'm not grown up enough to do that. I'm a financial advisor with 25 years experience. I manage $100 million. I am a mentor. I mean, I know on paper, check, 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 check. But then there's the reality. And I know some of my peers when we were talking about this call too, we're like, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. So what is the magic wand, the pill to take to be the Colleen that comes in and just says, boom, I am on this board and I deserve to be here?
Jamie, I love that question because COVID has made actually imposter syndrome worse. Even I'm thinking about, ooh, do I even have the qualifications? But everybody, almost virtually every woman I work with has imposter syndrome of some size. And so here's my take on this. You know what? If the guys can do it, I can do it. I'm going to do this. I don't care. Got to do it. And boy, I can tell you, I see Lene kind of nodding. It wasn't fun to be like the first female CEO of a company. I mean, I can tell you stories. The whole time is like, maybe they're right. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Right, Margaret? You're the first female CEO of your company and you're new at it. And there are moments where, it's just like, surely they're going to figure out I don't belong here. But the bottom line is everybody has some form of imposter syndrome. So get over it. I'm going to tell you, Jamie, I know some of your background and you would be perfect for many organizations. Your background is perfect. So the hardest thing is getting no when you're vulnerable, but it's a couple-year process, honestly, to get on a board. Sometimes you're lucky. Sometimes it takes longer, but you should be on a board. Your skill set should put you on a board. So, and everybody has unique skill sets. I just happen to know a little bit about yours, Jamie. And it's like a Band-Aid. Just, put a Band-Aid on it and put it aside and don't worry about your imposter syndrome because everybody has it.
Thank
Colleen,
you.
can you also speak to what you said when we were talking about applying for positions and what the males might not hesitate on versus how I was hesitating? Yeah.
I think all of us can relate, but thank you. I think that was Blair asking the question. And,
Yes.
and most women will wait until they're 99% qualified to apply for a board. And most men, this has been measured, will say, hey, I've got 50% of that. Yeah, I can do that. And that's what I had to get over because I was really known for, a little bit of that perfectionism before I put my hand up for that next job. And I really encourage you to stretch, go for it. Always go for it because, what's the worst that can happen? You get turned down. So what? Go on to the next opportunity.
Yeah, beautifully said, Colleen. There's very little risk other than being turned down, right? And you learn something along the way. Nandini asked a question in the chat. She said, how do I get into the first board? So the first board list person said, it's only for executives. I have a lot of tech experience and I'd like to contribute to the right companies. My title is engineering manager, and she's wondering, how does she break into that first board? And maybe it's the way you're targeting the board. Maybe it needs to be a nonprofit board or it needs to be some other smaller board to get that first experience.
Yeah, I was told there's over 6,000 board members registered on LinkedIn. So understand that, look at your network and see who you know who are board members and ask this question of them as well. But when I wasn't being heard in the corporate world for board seats, I ended up chairing United Way. I just went after nonprofits and first started with, there's so many, but, just keep serving on boards and they're always made up of executives or individuals that, I mean, keep serving on boards, meaning nonprofits, or even, a small board that is doing a startup who would probably love your input, but start with your network. That would be the first thing I would comb through. And the second thing I would look for nonprofits to start polishing up your skills and then go from there. And it does take a time, but I think nonprofits you can get on in short order, not always, but generally, and then work your way up. I've been at this a long time. I do have a little bit of annoyance with celebrities who think they can be board directors when you understand what I just said about what it takes to be a director, and not crossing that line of doing management's work, like recruiting people. That's generally what they use celebrity directors for, but they don't understand the fiduciary responsibility. They don't understand the mandate. And that's the part that worries me. If you go into this and understand what I just said and come at it that way, and just keep pushing and scrubbing for an opportunity, you will land on a board. You will land on a board. There is enough activity out there that you will find a board.
Colleen, this is Randa. How do you feel about recruiters, board recruiters?
Hi, Randa. I didn't know you were up. I will say, honestly, no matter what my profile has been, no recruiter has gotten me a board seat. So keep that in mind.
Good to know. Thank you.
I just wouldn't rely on them. Faye, too, same thing? Or do you have a question, Faye?
No, I have a question. First of all, Colleen, thank you very much. I want to ask my question and frame it, Jamie, for you, because I believe that we've miscategorized imposter syndrome around the fact that boards have not had non-traditional backgrounds and skills as experts, which I assume that many on this call are. So it's not so much that we're not ready for it, is that the demand side has not been looking for it. With that in mind, Colleen, when you think of modern boards in 2021, what do you think's in vogue in terms of skills and expertise that this group of women are bringing to the boardroom that we should prioritize in our thinking?
Well, first of all, we're seeing a big demand for women on boards. What used to be we're going after 20% by 2020, and now it's 50% by, there's 50 and 50. Is it by 2050? That sounds ridiculous. I'm going to say 50% by 2030. But so I think the demand is there, and there's an awareness that has become very much a part of the discussion in the boardroom. Also, you're seeing demand by shareholders, big shareholders, requiring boards to get gender balanced. BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard have all written policies that they will not vote for boards that are not gender diverse. So that's really changing the conversation. The second is the willingness to step beyond a CEO role and bringing expertise by category or skill. So those of you who have that hard category that you bring the skill level to will be able to contribute to a board. And so that openness, if the big guys are doing it, then the little guys start doing it, and then the nonprofits are already starting to feel like they should be doing it. Suddenly, it's opened up a new dialogue. I'll also add that if you're in California, or if you are interested in serving in California, they've written it into their laws. It's being challenged, but it's definitely happened, that they have to diversify. And by the end of this year, I think it's one woman. By the end of next year, 2 women have to be on the board if you are headquartered in California. Other states have, like Washington State, Colorado, have not made it a law, but have made it a recommendation. So you're starting to see, I don't like quotas, honestly. I didn't want to be the token anything. None of us do. But I was talking to a very seasoned board director last week, a friend of mine who served on the Nordstrom board and Starbucks and Alaska Air and some big boards. And she and I have always had this position. We don't like quotas, but we both are going, maybe we were wrong. The only way to get this done is for these laws to be passed. So I do think, Faye, that the conversation has changed. I think demand has changed. And while it's still not pervasive, it's getting close. It's getting really close that they've got to have gender diversity on boards. It's a risk liability if they don't. Even the directors and what is called D&O, director and operators insurance, is making it a qualifier for rates. The insurance that you have as a director, they're requiring boards to diversify. So the pressure's on.
That's great. Anyone else? We have just a couple minutes left. Would love to hear from anyone else that might have a question for Colleen.
I have a question. It's kind of a, hi, Sarah.
Hi, Sarah.
Follow-up question to one you already answered when they were talking about how to get on their first board. Would you, and I know you mentioned starting with some nonprofits and philanthropic things that you're passionate about. Do you think serving on committees within charities for, you know, they do a lot of like fundraising committees, event committees, things like that. Is that baby stepping stone before, or is that just like, oh my gosh, you could be on 20 of those, move on? But is that kind of get you in their purview, I guess, if you are?
Absolutely, Sarah. Yeah, I think that's a great way to do it. I know with United Way, they were much more flexible on the youth. They have youth United Way, and they had financial committee for United Way, and they had marketing committee for United Way, and much more flexible in getting on the big board, but very much got you known by the directors because you'd come in and report, or we get to know you because we served on that committee. But absolutely, I think it is worthwhile. Now, if you feel you're being used after 18 months and nobody's even giving you the time of day, I wouldn't hesitate to move on, because there are plenty of those baby steps that will make a difference for you. So I think that's a great point, Sarah.
Lovely. Anyone else? Any other questions?
I'm not following all the chat.
Yeah, I'm trying to make sure that we are getting all the questions in the chat, and it looks like we are up to date.
Hey,
So
Julie,
I will give everyone a moment to ask any other questions, and then we'll wrap it up just a minute or two early.
I think Julie has a question.
Yes, I have a question. Thank you for everything. It was wonderful. You mentioned some time frames for average tenure of CEO, average tenure of board being 14 years, and then the one board that you were on that had a 3-year rotation. I know nonprofit boards have very specific rotations, but when you're talking about an average tenure of 14 years, that's a long-term commitment. So is that, what's average if they're, I mean, that's average, but what is your experience? That's maybe statistically an average, like what type of commitment? You talked about the number of hours. That's really important, I think, because I think everyone thinks it's more glamorous than it is. It's a lot of time and a lot of work. And I appreciate you saying that. Just, can you give us like years, like what your experience has been? Like how long you're committing?
Yeah, it depends. It always depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bulk of that 14 years comes from when executives retire to when they don't want to serve anymore. And generally that's somewhere in their mid 50s to late 50s, and they serve till 70 or 72, 74. And a lot of people go, oh, that's really old, right? That's, how can they serve that long? But in reality, if a board turns, depending how big the board is, if it turns every year or every other year, that's a lot of turn, right? And so they're shooting for an average, I think it's up 10 years when you're dealing with like best practices.
Okay.
And so, you've got some that serve 3 years, and I've done that. I was on Career Builder 3 years. I was on cars.com, which was really the classified ventures, but cars.com for 3 years. And in part because I had a conflict once I left the other employment, so I couldn't serve on the board.
Okay.
And so there's always exceptions. And oh, by the way, you're not shackled for life. You get to decide. And there's a lot of control. I was on the United Way board in Seattle for 10 years.
Okay.
And I couldn't, I would be on it today if I could, but I moved away and couldn't. But I believed in their cause. So also, companies aren't around forever. You know, they get
Yeah.
sold,
Yeah.
they get, you know, absorbed, et cetera, into other companies, or they close. So,
Mhm.
you know, I threw out 14 because that is the Fortune 500 measurement. I don't know off the top of my head if anybody has done all publicly traded boards.
Very helpful context. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Colleen, do you serve
Everyone.
on multiple boards at a time?
Yes. I wouldn't recommend it as a CEO or as an executive in a company. I think one other board gives you great perspective because you're so busy with your own job. And while I was at Fisher, I was on one other board, and that was what I committed to my board. And most boards have restrictions on their executives about serving on outside boards. But once I left Fisher, it's now what I do. I serve on 3 public company boards, one nonprofit board, which is a $3 billion business, so it's not small, and then one private family board, which is a 160-year-old company.
All right,
And
lovely. I will say we could go on for quite a while, obviously, right? And I am, again, so grateful for the time that each of you have given to LeadHERship Global to listen to Colleen Brown. I mean, obviously an incredible expert, and I can tell you firsthand, an inspirational leader. I would just invite all of you that are guests with us today at the LeadHERship Global LinkedIn Live event, that if you are ready to unleash your full potential and be with other high-performing and growth-oriented leaders in a confidential, supportive, and private community, please reach out to me. My name is Linda Fisk. I'm the CEO of LeadHERship Global. And again, Colleen, so grateful for all of the wisdom, the advice, and the guidance that you shared with these ladies today. I hope everyone found this to be as impactful as I did. And I really want to say thank you to all of you for giving us an hour, and certainly to Colleen providing such incredible insight. Thank you, everyone.